I want to introduce you to Dr. Stephen Loyd. Have any of you seen the series or read the book Dope Sick? Yes. So this gentleman's going to tell you the part he played in that. And then he's going to tell you many, many other things. Now, we have discovered we have things in common. First of all, we both have roots in Appalachia. And any of you who know me know that that is the most important quality you can have. We actually went to the same college, just different times. And we both are profound believers in social justice for our families. I'm not going to tell you any more about him because it's all a part of his presentation. So I'm going to turn this over, sit back, relax, enjoy your coffee, and Stephen is going to really enlighten you about social justice.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. This is one of my favorite cities in the world. I love Chicago. So the slides I have, there's only two of them that have words on it. So I'm going to tell you stories as we go through this, and I'm going to start off with a little bit of confession. So the first thing is this will be part talk, part 12-step recovery meeting, which is how I like to do things. And I'm going to let you get to know me and see me a little bit, because I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today if substance abuse and mental health issues hadn't brought me to my knees. And it woke me up to a world that I didn't realize was out there. I was living in my little doctor world where everybody's a doctor and they live in my neighborhood and they drive the cars that I drive. And that's the world I was living in until I got picked up out of that world and set in the real world. And it's one of those things that when you see it, you can't unsee it. Now you can be in denial about it, but you can't unsee it. And I'm going to talk about the criminal justice system, and I'm going to make some admissions about myself that I'm not particularly proud of, but it is where I was, and you'll see where I am now and the things that I think that will help us going forward. So I want to address the dope sick thing real quick. So my friend Beth Macy wrote a book called Dope Sick. It's about the story of the OxyContin epidemic where we're from. Beth is from Roanoke, Virginia. I'm from Jonesboro, Tennessee, up in the northeast corner of Tennessee. So Beth is probably 150 miles from me, but we're all in that rural Appalachia area. And she wrote a story about the OxyContin crisis and the Sacklers and the promotion of the drug OxyContin where we all live. And her book was outstanding. It was a New York Times bestseller. I met her in her process of writing that book. And I'll tell you about my hat as a result of that. So Beth was writing the book. She gets to the end of it and she was just depressed. And she's calling around asking people, is there any good news out there anywhere? And about 3 people said, hey, you need to talk to this dude, Stephen Loyd. So she looked me up, called me out of the blue, and I talked to her. And Beth and I got to become friends. And she actually closes the book Dope Stick with the story that I'm getting ready to tell you, which is the story of my hat. My hat says 70 times 7 on it, by the way. So we were, as Beth and I got to know each other, and I actually wound up in her book, the first one, my picture's in there even. And it's a good one of me too. I was thin and trim and had a little bit of hair, but so we were going to open up an OTP in Northeast Tennessee, a rural area. An OTP is a methadone treatment program. There wasn't one within about 100-mile radius of Northeast Tennessee, and it was going to be a cooperation between the university and the hospital, not some hedge fund. And we were going to do mental health out of that as well, and criminal justice outreach into our jails. We have jails and prisons in Northeast Tennessee. And the community, as you might imagine, was not very fired up about it. Now, keep in mind, this is the community that I grew up in. I was living in Nashville at the time, but I grew up in this community. And so they wanted to have a meeting at the fairgrounds in Gray, where I grew up. And so the state asked me to go up and answer questions. And so I did. And it was an audience a little bit smaller than this, but not much. So you can imagine how many people were there. And boy, were they angry. And they were mean and nasty. And there was a lady, I'm sorry, sitting about where you are. She was dressed in head to toe orange, which frightened me. And she, the whole time, she kept holding her phone up and taking my picture. And I'm thinking, what's she doing? And she turns out she was broadcasting me on something called Facebook Live, which I've never heard of. At any rate, I didn't care. I didn't say anything I wouldn't have said in public anyway. And I was talking about the need to meet people where they are. And so when we deal with mental health and substance use issues, apparently in school, we learn it's okay to treat these people any way we damn well please. And I don't know of another disease process where that's okay. I don't. And so I'm talking about the need to meet people where they are. And I'm going to talk a lot about substance use, but guys, I hear this term co-occurring all the time. And it's supposedly co-occurring mental health issues with substance use disorder. Hell, it's all co-occurring. I've never seen it not be. Not one. If y'all can point one out to me, I'd like to see it. So, and this is all me just looking. So we're talking about that, and I'm talking about just the need to meet people where they are no matter what. And she goes, how many chances does somebody get, when she finally stood up and asked her question? And she was evil. And I'm standing in Northeast Tennessee, and I'm a bit of a smartass. And I looked out and I could see 4 church steeples from where I was standing. 4 different churches. That's the story of Northeast Tennessee. Okay, church every 15 feet. And it dawned on me that Jesus actually answered that question. I remembered it from Sunday school. Jesus said, not 7, not 70, but 70 times 7. Now, Jesus' point was not right? Jesus' point wasn't 490. Jesus' point was, how many times does it take? How many times would you go in a crack house to get your kid? Right? And I've seen so many people shamed over that through the years. And this teaching out there that, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. Until you walked in those shoes, I would appreciate you just being supportive. And so I feel like I'm in front of a Baptist church right now, by the way. So that's where 70 times 7 came from. It's what we named our nonprofit that my son and I started. And our goal with our nonprofit is criminal justice. I'm 56 years old. I'm pretty healthy. I figure I've got 15 years of working life left in me. I want to spend the next 15 years in criminal justice because my eyes have been opened. I used to think when I saw people in trouble, I used to think that they should be there, right? They did the crime. They had the same choice as I did. They made that choice. Then they'll learn from that, and then they'll get out and they'll do better. If they don't, they'll just go back to jail. And oh, by the way, most of the faces I saw were black. Okay. And they had just as equal chance as I did. I had no clue what I was talking about. None. And when I got out and got in this field and started working in criminal justice, I was blown away. I had no idea about stop and frisk. Y'all know what stop and frisk is? Right? So I had no idea about, because I knew that when I was in high school, if you stop and frisk me, my ass was going to jail. I had weed on me most of the time, right? But I wasn't subject to stop and frisk like my black classmates. I didn't know any of that. And so somebody told me about this book called The New Jim Crow, written by a lady named Michelle Alexander. And I started there, and I have not stopped, because I see exactly what Dr. Alexander was talking about. And I see it every day in rural Tennessee and in the jails that I work in. And so I told this story whenever we were out talking on that airport phone call she just talked about. Is when I got into the jails and I started working, or early on, I worked mainly with women, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a little bit. But one of my ladies was in front of me, and she was kind of itching around, right? And I deal with people with opioid use disorder, and I don't know, I can't be the only one in the room that's ever withdrawn from opioids, but whenever you're withdrawing from opioids, you itch. And I thought, well, maybe she's still in withdrawals, and I need to address that. So, what's going on? Are you still withdrawing? She goes, no. She said these outfits or uniforms they give us have stripes on them. They're made out of basically burlap sack, and they itch. And I was sitting there, I was thinking, well, don't you have on undergarments? No. Why didn't she have on undergarments? Because the jail wouldn't let them bring them in. My ladies in jail didn't have bra and panties. I couldn't understand. I still don't understand it to this day. They're not a member of the Manson family. And even that, right? And so they didn't have underwear. And I just could not understand that. And when I went back in another time, one of my patients from the outside had been incarcerated on an old charge. And when I went to see her, they said, you can't see her. She's in solitary. And I said, and I knew her. It's like, she runs on batteries. What the hell is she doing in solitary? They caught her with contraband. Do you know what her contraband was? It wasn't underwear. I wished it was. So the thing that entered my mind when I wondered about underwear, I started wondering about menstrual cycles. What happens then? Because we've seen that in our offices with people that don't have resources. And so I started wondering about that. And so I asked a question. They said they get 2 pads per day. And they actually have to prove to the guard that they're on their menstrual cycle. And so I'm running this through in my brain. And guys, I'm telling you, this happens in about every rural jail in the United States. I don't care what state you're from. These are all, I mean, I just didn't know. And so I said, you know, they said, you get 2 pads, you have to prove it to them. And I said, well, they don't have undergarments. The ones that did have undergarments got them from the commissary. There's $7 a pair for like little cotton panties that you can buy at Costco, that many for $7. And so a lot of them don't have resources or money, so they can't. So some of the girls, when they leave their underwear to the girls who are still there. And so I said, you know, what do you do if you don't have underwear? Well, nobody had a question. Nobody had an answer for that. So here's what my patient did. Her contraband was that she took the pad and fashioned it into a tampon. Right. I mean, I didn't sleep forever. I mean, I'm on the phone calling people. I'm like, how is this possible? Guys, this is a social justice issue. If when I was in med school, you told me, Steve, in 2023, you're going to go to Chicago and you're going to talk to people about social justice issues, and I would have thought you had lost your damn mind. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I wanted to go be a doctor, make my money, and go about my life. And then something happened in between, guys, and put me here. And I couldn't be more grateful, because I'm a much more happy dude. Because that guy who didn't realize that the criminal justice system is designed to keep you in it. You all know that when you get in it, it's almost impossible to get out. You can have a misdemeanor, and until your fines are paid, and the fines are ridiculous in the first place, but until your fines are paid, you're still on probation. So 1129 ends, you still got $2,000 worth of fines, which should be $2 million, because you can't get a job. And so you go out and you fail to signal a lane change, and some cop pulls you over and figures out that you've got an outstanding fine from your 1129, you go back to jail. And every single time, if you're struggling with a mental health issue or a substance use issue, now you got to deal with the jail medical staff who for the most part don't know their rear end from a hole in the ground about anything that they're dealing with here. They stop your medication blindly, a lot of times with somebody with no medical license. And now you're decompensated, and we keep you in there and let you out and stick you back out in the community decompensated. And then they rearrest you when you do something as a result of the illness that we didn't treat in the first place. And they are somehow surprised. It's just crazy to me. So that's kind of a little bit what happened to me. And I'll talk about my own addiction in a minute, because I never would have gotten into any of this stuff if it hadn't been for my own addiction. So I'll flip back to Beth real quick. Beth writes Dope Sick. It sells about 500,000 copies. It makes it to high up on the New York Times bestseller list. And a couple of years after it came out, she called me up, and because we became friends from that, we started working on little projects together and articles. Beth is a fantastic writer, and I have a few stories. And so she said, Steve, she said, I got great news. She said, they want to make my book into a Hulu series. And I was like, oh, Beth, that's great. You know, what's Hulu? And I honestly did not know what Hulu was. And she said, it's like Netflix. And I knew what Netflix was. They knocked Blockbuster out of the water. So I knew what that was. And I thought, that's great. And she said, so we're going to fictionalize a doctor, and we're going to rotate the stories around this fictional doctor. And we're going to give this doctor his own addiction. And we would like for you to help us with that. And guys, I grew up in Northeast. I'm from rural Appalachia. I got no experience writing anything like that. I mean, it's amazing I got through med school. Okay. You hear me talk right now. All right. So I'm sitting here. She says, we want to run the scenarios by you to make sure that they're realistic. And I said, sure. So this is in the pandemic. The writers are all out in California and Hollywood. Our producer's a guy named Danny Strong, and there's some young women in the room. Danny was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the Gilmore Girls. I've never heard of either one of those two things. But my 25-year-old daughter loves them and thinks I'm cool because I know Danny, but Danny's a producer now. And so we had the writers and producers in California. Beth was in Roanoke, and I was in my office in Nashville, Tennessee, where I live. And we were going through these scenarios, and none were realistic. And Danny said, well, Steve, he said, why don't we just use your stories? We know they happen. The first thing that went through my mind is, because I'm going to take them damn things to my grave. That's why we're not going to use them. I thought about it really for about 2 seconds, and here's what I came up with. What if you had a disease you never saw anybody get better from? What would it be like? Because we never see people on the other side of it. Everybody likes the dirty underbelly. I'm going to tell you all the dirty underbelly you want to hear. The good part is right here. The good part is I fly into Chicago last night, and I don't hit the strip bars, and I don't hit the bars. I hit Lou Manotti's pizza joint, right? Go back to my room, watch the Bears game, enjoy the beautiful architecture along the Chicago River. Right, that's what I do. That's my life now. There are more people living in active recovery in the United States than there are active addiction. You never see that, right? So that comes with a bad asterisk, and the bad asterisk is that number is flawed because of the number of people that have died. And I'm telling you, those are systemic deaths, and I'm going to break your heart with one today. So I didn't know who was going to be cast in the role of Stephen Loyd, and so it turns out it was some unknown cat named Michael Keaton. And I tell people that he was a hack before he got my role. I shot him to start him. But everything you see in Dope Sick from episode 3 on is my life. It really happened. 2 things didn't happen. I never bought a school bus. I should have, as many people as I've carried to treatment in my life now. And I haven't relapsed. But I haven't relapsed, guys, because the title of my talk, I'm a turtle on a fence post. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. Everybody in this room, whether or not you're in recovery, whether or not you've ever had mental health issues, you're really a turtle on a fence post too. Somebody at some point in your life made decisions that put you where you are today, right? Anybody living in recovery is a turtle on a fence post. I will guarantee you that. All right. The opposite of addiction is not recovery, guys. The opposite of addiction is community and relationship, and it's why social justice matters. I'm standing in front of you today because the system of care that I stepped into back in 2004 was designed to put me right where I am today. What's the success rate of doctors with substance use disorder? What percentage of doctors come in on day 1 and at year 5, not day 5, year 5, are back in their job free and clear of everything? What percentage? Give me a number. It's about 95. It's about 95. We don't bat that with strep throat, okay? But we bat it with that. Why? Is it because doctors are smarter than everybody else? Nope, I belong to that group. I can tell you for sure that ain't true. It's because they cost too much money to make. They cost too much for us just to kick to the curbside and replace them. And so it's much cheaper to put a system of care in place that rehabilitates them and put them back in their job. And I am a beneficiary of that. I'm going to talk to you about the importance of lived experience today. It takes sick people to help sick people. It always has, and I think that it always will. And I'm almost a fraud. Now, my bottom was bad. I didn't go to jail. I didn't go to prison, but I went to bed half the nights praying I wouldn't die, half the nights praying I would. I don't know it gets any worse than that. Okay. But I also had a 6-figure income. I also had MD hanging on the wall. I also had a president of my university and a dean of my medical school that did not fire me and paid me every day I was gone. I came back into a house that I owned in a neighborhood that as a little boy, I couldn't believe that I would ever live in. And so I'm almost a fraud. I'm not a fraud in the fact that my addiction was real and it damn near took my life. The support system that I have is unlike anything that probably anybody in this room has any experience with. So here's my ask. We have opiate abatement money all across the United States right now. It's about $54 billion. It's nowhere near enough. But I ask that we take that money and I ask that we start to build systems of care. You can't just spend stuff on one thing, guys. And I think that we need to look at building systems of care that, number one, no matter where you touch the system, you get the help that's right for you, not the help that somebody happens to provide that you get sent to, because that's what happens all the time. And then it's about social determinants of health, right? It's 95% of our health care in this room, guys, has nothing to do with our access to a doctor. It has everything to do with access to clean water, safe place to sleep tonight. Right? Those basic needs, right? This is Maslow, like from undergrad psychology. This dawned on me one day. I don't know how it took me that long to figure it out. But whenever I'm trying to help people find their path to recovery, I can't dive into their damn childhood trauma on day 2. Their brain's scrambled, and I'm lucky they're alive. We have to provide basic needs. We have to, you've seen the ASI, right? The Addiction Severity Index got 6 categories. I used to take legal and put it at the bottom. We'll address that one later. Hell no. That's got to be first. Until you deal with that one, you can't deal with any of the others. It dominates everything else. And so as we look at this, and I really wish there was a national-led effort, and we're actually trying in some states. The states I've worked in, Kentucky, North Carolina, Tennessee, I really love North Carolina, now North Dakota, Alabama, right? These are the states that I'm working in, trying to get these governors to see what I'm talking about and building a recovery-oriented system of care. So that's a little bit about, I guess that's the longest introduction to a talk that you all have maybe ever heard. But today's talk is different. Today's talk is going to be different than the normal ones I do because I want to talk more about the personal stuff. And I'm going to talk about my own story a little bit more because, guys, I grew up in Northeast Tennessee with a mom with untreated mental illness. She had bipolar disorder that was never treated until after she and my dad were divorced 30 years into their marriage. She also had a benzodiazepine addiction. She was ungodly abusive to me and my sister. And I'm not talking spankings or discipline. I'm talking belts, belt buckles, anything that you can be hit with, tobacco sticks, baseball bats, ends of shotguns. If you can think of being able to hit somebody with it, I promise you, me and my sister have been hit with it. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse. It took me a long time to deal with this one. But when I was, the earliest memory I have is around 5. My favorite uncle started to molest me when he came in, and I slept in the bed with him and all kinds of crazy things that you just can't imagine that, a family would ever let their kid do. And when I got a little bit older, into 6, 7, 8 range, it got worse than that. Until I got too big. The beatings with my mom happened until I can't remember what she swung at me one day. I think it was a tobacco stick, and I grabbed it in midair and took it out of her hands. That's when that stopped. And that's how I grew up. I'm not fussing about it. I'm not putting blame on anybody. It's just the reality. I come from a long line of people with addiction. I come from a huge East Tennessee family, 10 aunts and uncles on one side, 9 on the other. I have 18 first cousins on my line. 4 of us died of substance use disorder before age 40. And all of us, except for one, have had an SUD or a mental health issue, most of us both. So the reason I tell you that is because I'm going to teach you about addiction today. I'm going to do it quicker than I normally do. I've got an aggressive agenda, but you have to understand that, and you have to understand where trauma plays into this, because until we start addressing underlying trauma, I don't think that we get very far. And I'd never heard of adverse childhood experiences. Guys, I'm completely self-trained. I didn't study any of this in school. This has all happened since 2004. And when I started learning about ACEs, and more importantly, when I got help with my physical and sexual addiction or sexual abuse, my life changed. And my life changed in a way that I really can't imagine. And I went to a place in Dixon, Tennessee called Onsite. And this is 10 years deep into recovery before I ever dealt with the sexual abuse. And the reason that I wound up having to deal with the sexual abuse is that was the one secret that I hung on to in treatment. I'm a dude. I'm sorry. I'm a Southern dude. Nobody's going to know that. That ain't happening. And so my kids got grown. I'm deep into my recovery. My career's done nothing but gone up. I've been the chief of medicine at my hospital. I've run residency programs. I'm working statewide for our then governor, Bill Haslam. And I started having PTSD symptoms, and I was almost 50 years old. I had never had a PTSD symptom in my life. I started having flashbacks. I started having nightmares, and it brought me to my knees. I was driving back to Nashville one day. It was up about probably an hour east of Nashville, coming in on the interstate. I had to pull over. I was crying so hard I couldn't see the road, but I wasn't going to tell anybody. And on December 18th, not long after that, I wound up on the edge of my bed, looking down the wrong end of a 357 up against the side of my head with the hammer back. I fully intended on taking my own life. And guys, I was not using. And the reason I tell you this little bit of the story is that it can still look good from a substance use standpoint. You've still got these other things over here that are driving it. I had no clue. And 2 things came to my mind. And the first one, I'm not sure why, but it did. I was worried about who was going to find me. And the second one is I remembered to ask for help. I laid the gun down on the bed. I called a buddy of mine. He said, Steve, less than an hour where you are is a place called Onsite. They do this work there that's amazing around trauma. I didn't call them. I didn't do anything. I threw my crap in the car. I drove there. They said, well, usually people, we have intakes and we don't have anybody here. And, and they're scrambling around as this dude's just driven up. And I heard a voice from back in the back. It came out and said, Steve, is that you? Walked out, this guy named Bill Lokey. Bill was my counselor back when I first got into recovery. He had changed jobs, and he came out and hugged me. They brought everybody in that night. They started to help me that night. I started to deal with the underlying sexual trauma. I was the beneficiary of something called EMDR. Never heard of it. Never heard of it. It was a way to take traumatic experiences and re-experience them without the fight, flight, freeze, or in my opinion, the worst one of the bunch that nobody ever talks about is appease. Fight, flight, freeze, and appease. And it changed my life. And so I started talking about it several years ago during my talks. And Onsite was just the most amazing place, but I almost hate knowing it exists. Why do I hate knowing it exists? Anybody know how much 4 weeks at Onsite cost? It's about $55,000. cash, no insurance. Okay, I make a good living, best 55,000 ever spent. What about my girls? What about my girls that have never known anything but abuse? I know treatment is out there that's ungodly effective, and I know that it'll never happen for them. And guys, we have to take a look at our priorities and what we're trying to do, right? And so that is a difficult thing to deal with on a personal basis when I'm dealing with the kind of sexual trauma that I deal with quite often. On-site changed everything for me. It put me where I am today, in addition to the alcohol and drug treatment that I got back in 2004. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that as we go through. All right. So, well, there we go. So my talk is a turtle on a fence post, but it may not actually be what you think. So I'm a Tennessean. I'm a proud Tennessean. I take Tennessee with me wherever I go. All right. Thank you. Thank you. I talk about famous Tennesseans, and the famous Tennessean is actually the author, Alex Haley. Alex Haley wrote a book called Roots. It was a nonfiction book, but a lot of historical fiction based on his family's enslavement from Africa to West Tennessee. Alex actually grew up around Knoxville in Norris, Tennessee. But Alex's book was made into a miniseries in the late 1970s, and they put it on TV, believe it or not, network TV, and it shook the world. Right, Kunta Kinte, and I'll never remember. I was 10 years old. I don't know what the hell my parents were letting me do, but when they took Kunta Kinte and they chopped his foot off because he kept, I never forgot that. LeVar Burton was actually the actor that played Kunta Kinte. But Alex Haley is from Tennessee, and Alex Haley talks about a turtle on a fence post. And everybody in the room knows one thing when you look at that turtle on a fence post right now. What is it? You know, everybody knows one thing about it. What is it? It damn sure didn't get there by itself. That turtle did not shimmy up that fence post. Somebody took that turtle there and they placed it, right? And that's what I want to talk to you. If you don't remember anything about what I talk about today, I want you to remember this, because this is our goal. And I'm going to show you why what you do matters every day. It's not going to be your normal talk, guys. I'm going to show you why what you do every day matters. All right. So anybody know what this number is? 107,622. What is that? It's the number of overdose deaths. So last year we have full year data for in the United States, 2020, believe it or not. There's been some data come out since then, not full year data. 107,622, number of overdose deaths in the United States. Now, put that number in perspective. That is a 747 airplane crashing and burning, killing everybody on board every 36 hours around the clock for a year. And if that was the case, there wasn't one of you that would have flown here, right? You wouldn't have. This number doesn't make the news. Why not? Because it doesn't happen all at once. It happens in bedrooms. It happens in hotel rooms. It happens underneath bridges. It happens in isolation. There are people in this room that have a family member, maybe even a son or daughter, that are struggling with a substance use or mental health issue, and your best friend in your Sunday school class don't know it. Why? Because you're ashamed. Because of stigma. Right? That's the reason. And these deaths happen. You look in the newspaper, 25-year-old dies. 25-year-olds don't die unless they have long-standing disease, okay, or they get killed in a wreck. If they get killed in a wreck, they mention that in the obituary. If they don't, they say they died unexpectedly. I met this group of women in Williamson County, Tennessee. You all don't know Williamson County. It's the richest county in Tennessee. It's where all the country music stars live. It's the 7th most affluent county in the United States. They ain't anybody in Williamson County hurting. I promise you that. And there's this group of incredible mommies out there that lost their kids to drug overdoses, that went to the finest of private schools in greater Nashville, that wrote about it in their damn obituary. I mean, these women are warriors. They did not want their kids to die of a disease and people not know what happened. One of them, my friend Betty Mason, wrote that her daughter lost her longtime battle with heroin addiction. And she was an equestrian rider, Harpeth Hills private school. And Betty wrote that in her obituary. Guys, when we start seeing stuff like that, we'll start making progress. Long as we see keeping it inside, don't want anybody to know, we'll be right where we are right now. And it's part of the reason I'm in front of you today. So that quote at the bottom of that number is my favorite quote. It says, every system is designed perfectly to get the result that it gets. And that's true. Football fans in here, Bill Parcells used to say about football, you are what your record says you are. Well, your team's 6-4. You're the best 6-4 team. I don't know. We're 6-4. That's what our record says. This is our record. It's where we're starting. All right. And we certainly don't want to wind up there. We want to make progress. So we got to cover addiction. I'm going to do it as quickly as possible. I can tell you this. Even though I'm going to do this in about 15 minutes, by the time you leave here, you're going to know more about addiction than 95% of the doctors that live in where you live. I'll guarantee it. And I don't care if you live near an academic institution or a medical school, because guess what? They don't teach it there. We get through medical school and residency, 4 years of med school, at least 3 years of residency. How many hours did we get on the proper prescribing of controlled substances for acute and chronic pain? None, zero. How many hours did we get on the recognition, risk factors of addiction, and referral to treatment? Equal, zero. Guys, what I'm talking about today is the #1 health problem in the United States outside of COVID. It's the #1 health problem in the United States outside of COVID. And in all of our medical training, we get no hours on it whatsoever. I go to schools and I ask them, hey, do you have this in your curriculum? No, why not? We don't have room for it. It's the #1 problem. What do you have room for? Right? Maple syrup urine disease. Anybody know what maple syrup urine disease is? There's actually an hour in med school on maple syrup urine disease. It's an inborn error of metabolism, and the baby's diaper smells like maple syrup, and they grow out of it. And you have an hour on that. I have no idea in hell why. Except there's questions on the national board exam on it, and you have to teach to that. So right now, I'm working to get questions on the national board exam on addiction, because it's the only way that they're going to, they don't talk about mental illness as it relates to addiction and the other way around. Guys, when I first started using, I'm going to tell you here in just a little bit, I started using, when I first used my first opioid, it was a half of a Norco, 2.5 milligrams of hydrocodone. I felt like I'd found a cure for my anxiety and my depression. It was the damnedest. I felt normal. I wasn't high. I felt normal. And I treated it. The problem is it took more and more for less and less effect, and damn near took my life. What I really needed was help with the underlying trauma, right? The sexual and the physical abuse that nobody ever mentioned, and it was obvious, and I'm going to talk about that again here in a second as well. So, all right, so we know addiction is the biopsychosocial model. Chuck that out the door. We're going to talk about a slot machine. I hate psychobabble. All right, so I teach it this way. When the 3 7s come down on the pay line, that's when the money comes out the bottom, all right? So the first 7 is the biology. It's the bio part of the biopsychosocial model. Guys, about 60% of addiction is genetic. Genetic. 1 chromosome from mom, 1 from dad. You can't do a dang thing about it. How can I get to somebody's underlying a genetic predisposition? I could ask them about their own substance use, right? That's probably not going to get me anywhere, because what's the most anybody's ever admitted to drinking? Y'all been doing this a while. What is it? 2. Have you ever met anybody that drank more than 2? I have not. Blood alcohol 400, I had 2. It must have been that big, all right? Nobody at the Bears game last night had more than 2. They need to watching that team. But at any rate, sorry, they hadn't been good since 85 or 86. So I can get to the genetic predisposition. How? Easy. Family history, right? So I'm sorry, I'm going to take you. You're sitting where my lady, what's your name? Patient. Okay, good. I can handle that. So Patience comes in to see me. Patience has broken her femur. Patience is going to need a pain medication, guys. We're going to stick a rod in her leg. We're not going to just send her out with no pain medication. She's hurting, and we're not cruel and unusual. All right, so how do I know whenever I write this medication that I'm not setting her on a pathway of destruction, right? How do I know that? And we don't teach our doctors and our nurse practitioners and our PAs how to do it, and I'm getting ready to teach you all. So the first thing is I need to get into Patient's family history. And Patience tells me, hey, Steve, when I was growing up, my dad was a drinker, and he would come home and a lot of times he had spent money that mom, didn't know about, and he would be drunk, and there would be a lot of chaos around that. Okay. He later got into recovery. And so I like to always finish on a high note. So Patience's first 7 is on the pay line. She's got genetic predisposition. The second 7 is the psycho part of the biopsychosocial model. What kind of household did you grow up in? Guys, none of us came out of a normal household, so get rid of that. They don't exist. Some of us come out of places that were worse than others: physical, sexual, emotional abuse, growing up with parents with untreated mental illness. Little Steve Loyd back in Northeast Tennessee. So Patience says, yeah, Steve, Daddy would come home sometimes and things would get pretty bad, and he and Mom would fight. Patience, did you ever see him hit her? Yeah, I watched that a lot. It used to scare me when I was a little girl. All right. Patience's second 7 is on the pay line. She is at increased risk to misuse this medication I'm getting ready to prescribe her. Does that mean that I don't prescribe it? No. It means that I give her informed consent, and if she has issues with it, I want her running back to me rather than going out. Because what happens is that doctors never ask any of that. Patience has no idea. And then when she develops an issue with it, by the time she figures it out, usually she's so far down the rail that we can't get her back and bad stuff is already happening. The third 7 in the biopsychosocial model is the social part, and that's what's widely available and socially acceptable. And guys, I am not the alcohol police, but I will guarantee you there are people in this room that are out of town that went to a bar last night, and I'm fine with it, all right? What's the most widely available, socially acceptable thing people have issues with? Still alcohol. 60% of the patients I treat is alcohol. Why? Because it's legal. You don't even have to leave this building to get it. You're 21 years old, you got an ID, you got money, and likely nobody's going to say a dang word about it. How did opioids come on the scene? Okay, so you have to understand this about opioids. We have known that they have been addictive and dangerous since the time of Hippocrates, 2,000 years. Why in the late 1980s and early 1990s did we change our mind? It was the influence of the pharmaceutical industry, suppressing the dangers and the safety of prescribed pain medication, mainly starting with Purdue Pharma and the drug OxyContin. So when a doctor writes a medication and there's multiple drugs within the class, how does the doctor choose which medication to prescribe if there's multiples available? And it actually winds up being the influence of industry, but that's not what we're taught. What we're taught in medical school is 4 things in this order. Number 1, is it safe? Not does it work? Is it safe? That's number 1. Number 2 is does it work? Efficacy. Number 3 is compliance. You got to take it 5 times a day or 1 time a day. And number 4 is cost. Cost is last. For all of us, cost will be first, right? But we go the other way around. So if you're a drug company out there that's making a drug and you've got to change a doctor's prescribing habit, what do you have to go after? Safety. You got to overcome that one or you can't get anywhere. You can't go in there, oh, we're cheaper. Well, are you safe? That's how we're taught. So Purdue Pharma knew that because all of them are doctors. They've never seen a patient, but they're all doctors. They all have medical training. And so they downplayed the risk and the safety issues with the drug OxyContin by saying that less than 1% of the people who take it become addicted, which was complete horse crap. It was horse crap, and it's been bared out. There was no medical literature to that. So when you have, now I sit down and I've got patients, I write her this prescription, I give it to her, she goes out into the world. I haven't told her any of that. Okay, she's dragging around this emotional abuse that she suffered as a child. Maybe mom had men coming in and out of her life that maybe things happened there that shouldn't have happened that she didn't share with me. And she's dragging this around. All of a sudden she gets this opioid on board. And here's what I didn't know either, is the area of your brain that interprets pain doesn't separate physical from emotional pain. So all of a sudden I'm treating this broken femur and my life seems a little bit better over here. And now when I'm done with the medication, I get out a few weeks and boy, I sure felt better when I was on that. Maybe my leg's hurting a little more. Maybe I need to go to another doctor and have them look at it to see that you get where I'm going? This happens all the time. Nobody is digging at all to see what's really going on with patients. And so I didn't give patients informed consent. Now she's using the drug. It's taken more and more for less and less effect because that's what happens when you take opioids from the outside, your body makes more receptors. So you got to fill those receptors up. Well, you're after dopamine. That's the thing that's released in your brain that makes you feel good. And the whole time those receptors are going down. So you need more and more for less and less effect. It's called tolerance. And the next thing she knows, she's asking friends and family members for it, or maybe even being clandestine and looking in their medicine cabinets when she goes over to their house. And then she starts going to different doctors. And then whenever she figures out she's in trouble, she comes back to the original doctor who wrote the medication. The original doctor who wrote the medication opens up the chart, goes on the computer, looks in the CSMD and finds out the patient has been seeing 5 different doctors and 6 different pharmacies. So she's doctor shopping. So how does the doctor treat patients? It kicks her out. Patience is addicted. She goes to the street. She starts buying pills, and now the pills are not oxycodone and hydrocodone, although they look just like it. They're fentanyl, and patients dies. Guys, that's how this happens. This is the number 1 way that it happens, and it happens really starting with the fact that we don't train our medical professionals who have prescribing power on how to give a patient informed consent and leave that door open for that patient to come back to them. Now, patients could choose to not come back to me. I could give her all the informed consent I want. Patients, this can happen. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm going to help you. She can still be ashamed because of the stigma associated with addiction, but I've done my due diligence. I'd like to see how much we could move the needle with just that, guys, not 55 pages of prescribing guidelines that nobody's going to read, right? And that's what I'm talking about. So when you think about addiction, I want you to think about the 3 7s, and everything that we're going to talk about happens within those 3 7s. And the big thing for us is that second 7, is that trauma. And I want to say this about trauma. and then we're going to talk about it in my breakout session. We are not our trauma scores, right? I had that trauma in my past. I have had great help. It does not define who I am right now. There were some resiliency things happened in my life that helped me get where I am, even through my addiction, right? So we've got trauma on one side, but we also have these protective factors, these resilience things that happen in our lives. And most of the time it comes in the form of a person, okay? So you all have known me now for 25 minutes. 25. What kind of student you think I was in elementary school? How was I? Oh yeah, I was terrible. I was the kid the first day of school that my new teacher already knew my name on the first day because my new teacher had talked to the teacher who had already done their year with me the previous year. So when I went to school, you went in the gym on the first day, the teacher come up with a long list of homeroom, they read your name off, you came down, went to your homeroom. That's how it worked. And our classes were, the sections of them. You started with section 1. Those were the smart kids. We all knew that. We're not stupid, right? We knew who the smart kids were, and all of us who were dumb, we knew who the dumb kids were. I was always in the dumb kid class, always. I was a discipline problem. I went to Jonesboro Elementary School. Jonesboro Elementary School, some rocket scientist designed that thing in the 70s, decided kids don't need windows because it distracts them. So we didn't have any dang windows in our school. And we didn't have classrooms, they just had partitions, right? And so when Steve got in trouble, my teachers would bring me around to the edge of the partition and corporally punish me by spanking me so the other students could see what was going on so they wouldn't do it, and they were using me as the example. I'm not mad about it. It's what it was. What was going on in my life? What was going on in my life? Whatever beating they gave me didn't come close to what my mom was, and I was never going to let some bitches see me cry. Wasn't happening. Never cried. I was being sexually abused. That was what was going on in my life. Guys, when we start talking about trauma, if you want to know who these kids are at risk, ask their damn teachers. They know. Instead of covering it up. Right? And I'm not mad or upset about it. It just is what it is. Right? So I went to this elementary school in Nashville several years ago called Fall Hamilton Elementary. I'd never heard of it. It's down near the fairgrounds in Nashville. The zip code that it's in at the time was the second most incarcerated zip code in the United States. And I heard that they were doing something around trauma for their elementary students. This is a metro public school. And so I saw their little video on YouTube, and I do what I do. I got in my car and I drove down to Fall Hamilton Elementary School. I learned a few things that day. Number one, you can't just walk in an elementary school anymore. Got through that process. They had a young principal there named Matthew Portell. He had a trauma coordinator who trained their entire staff. It cost $65,000 a year. Everybody from the custodial service to the cafeteria workers to the teachers' aides were trauma informed. I saw these little kids coming in, this high with afros this big, and I had an afro that big. I was jealous. And I saw that whenever they got in trouble, they weren't being treated like I was. They were being redirected by people who understood the households that were coming in, because most of them were being raised by their grandparents because their parents were incarcerated or dead. And I cried all day long. It's possible. And here's the thing that really wore me out at the end of the day. The principal, Matthew, told me, he said, Steve, they're thinking about getting rid of my trauma coordinator because she was, how much? And it was $65,000 with her salary and benefits. I said, hell, we'll donate that. That's the best $65,000 you can spend. Guys, there are things that we can do, and my talks normally don't go like this, but when I think of it, I want to talk about it because we know who these kids are. We know what's happened to them up to this point. We can tell by their behavior. Steve Loyd in the 1970s was taken around and whipped and punished. And by the way, if my mom found out that I got punished at school, it was a whole lot worse at home, right? So they were really making my home life worse on me as well. So I got to tell you what happened to me though. We got in 7th grade, and my life had been that way up to that point. It was the first year in the state of Tennessee we took standardized tests. I think it was 1978, 79, somewhere in there. We took standardized tests. They now call them TCAPs. And after we took that standardized test, about a week after the scores come back, none of us knew what it meant. We just all like drawn into little circles. And a guy named John McConville, a teacher, came and took me out of this dumb class. And he put me over here with the smart kids. I thought I was smart. It changed my life. We talk about protective factors. That was John McConville changed my life. And by the time I figured out what he did and I tried to reach out to him, he had died. All right. He changed my life by taking me from this class to this class because I thought I was smart. Still all the same stuff still going on at home. None of it ever changed until I left. I mean, the sexual abuse changed when I got bigger. Mom couldn't beat us anymore because, she wasn't as big as I was. But the other stuff, the emotional stuff was still going on. I was a pinger. I walked in the room, I got to ping. I got to know how she's doing so I know how to behave so I can keep all this shit together. And that's the way I live my life. Is that anxiety producing? Hell yeah. Try living your life like that. That changed my life, guys. There are these protective factors out there, these people that intervene in our lives that give us these resiliency things that allow us, and we need to build on those. And we need to address trauma as soon as we see it. We need to be talking about prevention efforts. Prevention efforts start by treating mom and dad. They just do. Right? That's where prevention starts. Right. And then when we identify these children in school, it can't be punishment. It has to be things that are going to help them build these resiliency factors they're going to need going forward in their life, because they are going to grow up and they are going to turn 18. All right. So you understand the slot machine. You understand a little bit about the role of trauma. I'm going to show you a little bit more about dopamine here in a second. My video's up there now, so I'm not sure if they just gave up on me ever moving slides or not. There we go. So the brain, real quick, 2 areas of the brain I want to talk about, and I'm not down there, so I can't show you. One is right here. The other one is in the front. Right here, if you imagine where my 2 fingers meet, cut me down this way, drop the left side off, look into the right side of my head. That's the go system of our brain. It's our reward system. It's a part of our brain that brings us pleasure, okay? It's the part of our brain that is responsible for 2 big things: your will and your desire to live, and your species going forward in time. That's what the go system of your brain's responsible for. It's called the limbic system. It has a bunch of structures in it that are named by some sadistic person. I don't care about any of that. I want to know about functions, so we're going to call it go. The other part of our brain I want to talk about is everything in right here, all right? Frontal lobe, okay? It's stop. So we're going to talk about go and stop. The frontal lobe, the stop system of our brain, has 3 big functions: insight, judgment, and empathy. Okay, that's the 3 big functions. So the go part of our brain, it's the part of our brain we feel pleasure. It is our lizard brain. Okay, it is where we feel pleasure when we eat, when we drink, when we have sex. Right, that's the part of our brain where we feel pleasure. That's its big function. It's not concerned with anything else. All right, so here's the deal. If the main function of the go part of your brain is your desire and your will to live, how strong is that desire? What would you do to save your own life here right now? I tell you, everybody in this room, you'll do anything. If we got rid of all the food and water in here, we sit here and looked at each other day after day. A couple of things going to happen. Number 1, we're going to drink each other's urine. Number 2, we are going to eyeball each other to see who's the weakest, because that's who's getting ready to get eaten first, and we're going to go down the line. Right? If you don't believe me, Google the Donner Party. I promise you that's true. That's how strong your desire and your will to live is. In addiction, guys, that goal of your reward system is replaced by the drug. And here's the kicker: your craving for that is 10 times stronger than your cravings are for food when you're hungry and water when you're thirsty. So when I treat pregnant women, I love it. And we're going to talk about it here in a second. It's my favorite thing to do. I don't want to do anything else. And every time people figure out I treat women who are addicted and pregnant, they go, Steve, they just need to put it down. They need to quit. Hell, I thought of that. Like right off the bat, I thought of it. That was the first thing that came to my mind. And now I tell people, okay, you're right. I'd like for you to stop eating. That's how hard it is. Only it's going to be actually a little harder for them because their cravings are about 10. Guys, people relapse because of cravings. Cravings are lifelong. I've been in recovery almost 20 years. I still have cravings. Okay. It just happens. I just have a set of tools, and I have this social network that helps me not go back and do the things that I used to handle that with. And I also got treatment for the underlying trauma and the mental health issues. Right? This is not rocket science. We know how to do this. It's just, are we committed enough to spend the resources to do it? That's really what it comes down to. And in my case, we were committed because I cost a lot of money. And again, I'm going to get into that in just a second. So that's the go system of our brain. Now, the other function of the go system of our brain, make sure our species goes forward in time. What does our species have to do to go forward in time? Number 1, got to live to be a reproductive age. Number 2, got to have sex. If we do that over a long enough period of time, our species will go forward in time. Does eating, drinking, and sex feel good? Yes. If it didn't feel good, if every time you did one of those 3 things, you threw your toenails up, you'd stop eating and drinking, you'd stop having sex, our species would die. So here's what happens. You get hungry, you get these cues in your environment that tell you it's time to eat, right? We would call them triggers if we were talking about addiction. Guys, it's the same pathways, it's the same stuff. So it gets to be about noon, you hadn't eaten. You didn't eat breakfast this morning, your body has some changes. You get a little sweat on your skin because your blood sugar drops a little bit. There's even an emotional component to it. And everybody knows the word for it, we get hangry, right? And you have euphoric recall. You remember the last time you felt like that, you went and ate, you felt better right after. So, and then if I want to really drive your cravings up, I'll bring the food outside, blow the smell in here, right? Next thing I know, everybody's out there in line. You come back in here, and everybody's going to relapse here at lunch. You've already announced it. You're going to start shoveling food in. Here's what happens in your reward system. Your body makes its own morphine, its own OxyContin, its own fentanyl. They're called endorphins and enkephalins. Those endorphins and enkephalins attach to the reward system, the opioid receptors in your brain, same receptors that heroin attaches to. It leads to the downstream release of dopamine. And everybody in here is fat, happy, satisfied with dopamine. That's why nobody wants to be the 1 o'clock speaker. That's the deal, right? And then the dopamine is taken back up into the nerve ending to waiting for the next thing to come along and cause its release. Right? That's how it works, because whatever made us wants us to be able to eat, have sex, reproduce, species goes forward in time. Eating, drinking, sex, all good things, right? Can you think of an instance where eating, drinking, or sex may not be a good thing? All right, I'm not stupid enough to go down the sex route. Anybody ever tried to lose weight? Right, hard as hell to lose weight, right? Very difficult. So here's the deal. The frontal lobe of your brain is about insight, judgment, and empathy. Your reward system is telling you to eat. It's food, right? It's good. You remember the last time you did it, but your goal is to lose weight and get in better shape. And that was me 7 years ago. I weighed 250, 255 pounds. Did every diet in the world known to man. All carbs, no carbs, all meat, no meat. I was a vegetarian one afternoon for about an hour and a half. Yeah, you people that do that have lost your mind. But at any rate, here's what I came up with. I'm going to watch what I eat and I'm going to exercise. I'm going to do it every day. And I do it every day. And I exercise a little gym called Orange Theory where I live. And I'll burn about 800 calories at Orange Theory at 6:15 in the morning. On the way home, I pass a Krispy Kreme donut. I love Krispy Kreme donut more than anything in the world. So Karen, when I die, stuff it all down here. That's how I want to go out. So when I drive by that Krispy Kreme donut, what's the reward system in my brain tell me? It's all about food, water, sex. Pull in there. I remember the last time I had it. I've got this visual. I can see right now the donut sitting there. I want it. What's my goal? Lose weight and get in better shape. I have a fully functioning frontal lobe of my brain. I promise you I'm going to tie this together for you guys. Insight, judgment, and empathy. My frontal lobe says, hey, hang on a second, Steve. You got out of bed at 5:45 this morning, burned 800 calories. You sweated pretty hard. Each one of those Krispy Kreme donuts is 220 calories and 20 grams of fat. Actually true. Not going to have much of a problem with that. I'm having 4. That's 880 calories. 80. You all laugh because you can relate. It's also how you get through every day. You look at a series of choices that give you benefits, and then your frontal lobe picks the choice that gives you the most amount of pleasure with the least amount of consequence, because you are fully neurologically intact. That's how it works. Krispy Kreme knows everything that I just told you. How do I know? Number one, they blow the donut smell out in the street. They're trying to make my lizard brain overwhelm my thinking brain. Right? I'm better at all that. I'm not going into any of that. I'm going to overcome it. And then they have one last line of defense, and everybody in here knows what it is. What is it? It's the damn hot donuts now sign. That's what it is. So now they have actually overcome that. Sorry, my water is turned over up there. It's the hot donuts now sign. Next thing you know, you're in the drive-through. That's how it works for me. All right. So, and those of you that have teenagers, pay close attention to this next little section. I'm getting ready to teach you why they're stupid. Okay. The stop and go parts of our brain are not neurologically connected until we're 23 years old for a woman and 25 years old for a man. And those of you that have trouble understanding that, look at your kids' car insurance rates. Right? Guys, everything I'm telling you is true. Right? We just didn't know it was true in this way. This is why your teenagers make bad decisions. How did you feel the first time they drove down the driveway without you in a car by themselves? It's one of the worst days of your life, because you lay awake at night with your eyes open and your ears open, waiting on that front door to open to know they're safe for another night. Why? Because they have a fully functioning reward system and they do not have a fully engaged frontal lobe. So they lack insight, judgment, and empathy. They don't realize they can die, and we do. That's the deal. Okay. Now, when they get to be 23 and 25, the insurance rates will go down. You can start talking to them again as well. They make way more sense. All right. What's that got to do with addiction? These connections are arrested in development at time of first drug use. Patient comes to me now she's 27 and she's pregnant. And she comes in and she's shooting heroin. And so we bring patients in and we detox her for 10 days. Like, all right, patients, you're good to go. Okay, you're detoxed, you're not going to get sick. Guys, the worst thing we do in any addiction is standalone detox. We kill people with it, but insurance companies pay the most for it, so that's what everybody does. It's useless. Not useless, they get 10 days with no drugs, but we're increasing their risk of overdose and dying as soon as they get out. And so I tell patients that, and patients walks out the door, okay? And this is the brain that Miss Patience walks out the door with. These are PET scans. Don't get intimidated by PET scans. All PET scans do is look and see where radio labeled sugar goes. All the cells in your body work on sugar one form or another. If you had a way to attach a tag to it, stick it in somebody, you could light up the cells that were working. These are the brains. That top row of brains are normal brains. See uptake all throughout the brain, frontal lobe, occipital lobes, parietal lobe. That second row of brains is Miss Patience. Patience has been detoxed off of drugs for 10 days, and I send her back out into the parking lot, and that's what her frontal lobe looks like. What do you see in uptake in the frontal lobe at the top? Nothing. What is intact with Miss Patience? Her reward system and all the cues in her environment, because the dope dealer didn't quit selling dope when Patience went in to rehab. And she gets out and all those cues are there, and she has absolutely nothing to stand on in overcoming the cravings that she's having. I told you people relapse because of your cravings. What are the chances that Patience makes it more than about a day? It's less than 10%. We have to understand this, guys. Addiction is not a moral failure, and this is compounded by untreated mental illness. Remember, I told you I got started back in the day, and it helped me with my untreated mental illness. And then as time went on, it got much worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. All right, I lost insight and judgment. I treated patients in the hospital that I should have never been treating because I was impaired, yet my mind was telling me I was as sharp as ever. This is not a made-up thing. It's not a moral failure. It's actually real. So let's look at that bottom row of brains. That bottom row of brains are brains that have been detoxed for 90 days. Look what's starting to happen in the frontal lobe. It's starting to come back, right? By the time I got out of treatment, I didn't get 10 days. I didn't get 28 days. I got 95 days of high-quality inpatient treatment from the best people in the world. By the time I walked out, I had this support system around me that was ungodly. I had urine drug screens that were administered in order to help me maintain my recovery, not as punitive, but to catch me in case I slip before I die. We got to stop using crap as punitive, by the way. And that's exactly what mine were designed to do. And I had this system of care around me. How long does it take to go from that bottom row of brains to the top row of brains? How long does it take? Anybody? 2 years. It takes 2 years. Guys, we don't just send people away for 2 or 3 weeks and they get better. We got to get out of that. That's why the system of care, it's what we're talking about with social justice, what we're talking about with social determinants of health is so important, because the main thing that's going to happen in these 2 years is these systems forming to help somebody maintain their recovery. And it has to be access to mental health care. I mean, I don't know how many of y'all live in a rural county. Try getting mental health care in a rural county. Good damn luck, right? Does anybody know this guy? This is Dr. Vincent Felitti. Felitti was the lead author of the ACEs study. I think it's the second most important study ever done in the history of medicine, only behind hand washing. And Felitti was a weight loss doctor in California in the 1980s. He treated mainly morbidly obese women. And some of the women would lose weight, some of them would put it back on. He wanted to know what was the difference. And he thought it had to do with something with trauma. He came up with a list of questions that we now all know as the ACEs questionnaire. There was one question in particular that got his attention, and it was this one. How much did you weigh the first time you had sex? And the answer he got was in the 40 to 50 pound range. And he realized he'd asked the wrong question. What question should he have asked? How old you were, right? These women were all victims of sexual abuse within their own family. And this is the other thing I want to point out to you. The drug is not the problem. The drug is the solution. What was these women's drug? Food. If they could eat enough, they could make themselves unattractive to their perpetrator. When Stephen Loyd was sitting at that red light in Johnson City as a chief resident, getting ready to graduate residency and go out on his own, flips open the glove compartment of his truck, and then there are some old Norcos. Y'all know them as Vicodin, 5 milligram Vicodin. Got them from a dentist months before, didn't do anything with them, slung them in the glove compartment of my truck and went about my life. And now I opened them this day. I'm dealing with anxiety. I'm dealing with depression. I've been chugging this trauma around with me for 33 years, 32 years at that point. Didn't like my wife very much, by the way. I'm still married to Karen. It was my fault. It wasn't hers. My kids weren't very well behaved. I had all this pressure on me from work. and I reached over and I broke one in half and I threw it in my mouth, and I'm sitting there and let's think about my slot machine. I've already told you, all right, I've got the genetics, I've got the trauma, and guess what? There was the opportunity. Time I got home 10 minutes later, suddenly my life was way better. My anxiety was better. My depression was better. My wife was better. My kids were better behaved. I had no idea about that area in my brain that didn't separate emotional from physical pain. And within 4 years, I was using 500 milligrams of OxyContin and 8 milligrams of Xanax every day. And it wasn't living underneath the bridge. I was seeing your friends and family in the hospital. I'm a hospitalist. I'm an internal medicine physician by training. I work in the ICU and medical step-down units. All 4 years that I was using, the graduating medical students voted me the best teacher in internal medicine, and I used the whole time. 6 weeks before I went to treatment that year in 2004, that graduating class voted me the best teacher in the whole school. And I used 160 milligrams of OxyContin during their graduation ceremony. All right. I want you to think about that. I had no idea about genetics, trauma, opportunity, and I was not protected by the fact I had MD on the wall. My underlying mental illness, I didn't want to talk about it because in my profession, if you have that, you're going to get shunned. And I didn't want anybody to know that I was struggling with sleeping. I was struggling with eating. I was struggling with all these other things in my life. Couldn't step out and ask for help. And guys, those are the kind of things that keep people sick. So Felitti takes that same ACEs study, turns it loose on the Kaiser Permanente health system. And here's the deal. When your ACEs score gets to be 4 or above, your risk of just about everything goes straight up. Real diseases like hypertension, diabetes, all different kinds of cancer, mental health issues, substance use disorder. So we're not going to get anywhere until we start addressing trauma and address it in a healthy, productive way. Not that this is this thing that can't be overcome, but that it's treatable and people can come out on the other side. It's the only biochemistry slide I'll ever have in my life. But when I figured this out, it all made sense to me. Okay. Chronic stress causes our pituitary gland to produce something called ACTH. ACTH tells our adrenal glands to make cortisol. Everybody in the room knows that cortisol is the stress hormone, right? Look what cortisol does to dopamine. It eats it. Okay, it eats it. Everybody in this room that feels good for any reason right now does because of a bunch of chemicals in your brain, but the big one is dopamine. When you watch your kid play sports or in the school play or in the band, that thing that's released, that love that's dopamine and oxytocin, right? And we all have baseline releases of that because whatever made us to be in community. It's why Zoom sucks, right? It's why this is a whole hell of a lot better, right? Why? Because we're in community and we like being around each other. Even people, like when you introduced me, you told me, I felt better. I knew you're from North Dakota, right? There's a little dopamine hit there. That's how it works. What if you're walking around chronically stressed from this trauma and your dopamine level is down here? I use Tigger and Eeyore. Tigger's here, Eeyore's here. Which one are you closer to? Eeyore. And then you find something that normalizes it. And that's what happened to me that day. I had all the risk factors. I had the underlying mental health issues. And then all of a sudden I found something that made me feel normal. When you are dealing with people with SUD, ask them about the first time they used. They'll be able to tell you specifics. They'll remember where they were, what they used, who they were with, the color of it, if it was a pill, if it was a powder, where they got it. Doesn't matter if it's 30 years ago. And then your next question needs to be, how did it make you feel? They're going to say, it made me feel normal. It gave me energy. And guys, this is the reason. It's not 100%, but it's damn close. And then when I started figuring this out, I really started to be able to help my patients because I knew what was driving and I knew what their underlying causes were for the most part. And now we can start working on getting help. The third 7 is just a social opportunity. The letter I have up here is what the Purdue Pharma used to market their medication OxyContin. First thing you'll notice is it is not a study at all. It is a letter to the editor in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1980. Dr. Herschel Jick and his then graduate student, Dr. Jane Porter, said that we had about 11,800 patients in our hospital in Massachusetts that received an opioid while they were here. We followed them when they got out. Only two of them became addicted. Guys, that's not even comparing apples to apples. Inpatient stays are short. Outpatient stays on medication are long-term. And this is what Purdue Pharma used to market their medication. And this is one of the big reasons that you see them losing the lawsuits. So now if you look at what I've taught you, you understand addiction, right? It's the 3 7s, genetics, trauma, opportunity. You understand the role of trauma. You understand the role of support. And now I'm going to show you in closing why it matters. When I first started this field, there's 2 groups of people I looked at. I looked at pregnant women. I looked at people who were incarcerated. I live in Tennessee. You don't get any more deep red than Tennessee. And I knew that we didn't care about people in prison. So I put them over to the side for a while and I went after pregnant women. because nobody was treating them. I heard all kinds of horrible things about these women. They're this, they're that. And then I would say, and this is in the treatment world, tell me what programs you have for them. Oh, we don't take them. Okay. You talk about them like that, but you don't take them. What if you get one, you don't realize she's pregnant, and then when she's there, you figure out she's pregnant? You know what happens then? This still happens today, by the way. Kick them out. Kick them out. All right. And so I said, I'm going to learn how to take care of pregnant women. Guys, I hate OBGYN. It was my least favorite rotation in med school. I used to tell people the placenta used to hit me in the back of the head. I couldn't wait to get out of the room. All right. And now my love is treating my ladies who are pregnant. Guys, this is the most resilient bunch of people I've ever met in my life. They give me strength. I love them. And they do so well. And the one you have up on your screen is the toughest patient that I ever had. Her name is Brooke. And Brooke is a certified welder. I knew Brooke for 2 weeks before she called me anything other than MFer. And she wasn't using the initials. Brooke is from Ohio. She's using IV heroin, IV fentanyl, and one other drug. What other drug is she using? Methamphetamine. Those little pick marks. Meth is made out of stuff you get at Lowe's and Home Depot. Gets deposited under your skin. It itches. It picks at it. She's using methamphetamine. She's 25 years old. She figures out she's pregnant with her first child and she wants help. She talks to her mom, Angie. Angie goes in, Googles doctors who will take women who are using IV drugs and pregnant. My name pops up. She calls me. I said, bring her. Angie threw her in the car seat. And this is a picture of Brooke 7 hours before I met her. The good thing about pregnant women is you can absolutely scare the hell out of insurance companies with them. So I scared the hell out of the insurance company every single time. And Brooke has a trauma history that my Sunday school class don't want to know about. She has underlying PTSD. She has underlying anxiety, underlying depression. And I want to tell you a quick funny story. Brooke has a baby daddy. I told you the world I lived in. So when I first started treating these girls, I had no idea in hell what a baby daddy was. And you know how when you get so far down the road that you can't go back and tell them you don't know, so you play like you do. That happened to me. And my kids told me about this app on my phone called Urban Dictionary. And so I now know what a baby daddy is. So Brooke's baby daddy is actually in prison back in Ohio for, guess what, right? For using and selling. And the reason I'm telling you this is because you see this, the time frame, pregnancy is 40 weeks. So I got Brooke at 8 weeks. This is 38 weeks. This is 30 weeks. I get to watch this all the time. I get to watch people go from this to this, and I don't even recognize them. And Brooke's baby daddy is back in Ohio, and she wants to go back there. I haven't been able to overcome this one yet, guys. My worst phone call I get from my girls is, hey, Dr. Loyd, my old man just got out. I hate it. I hate it. Now, if we can get the old man, and I hate using that word, good Lord, if we can get the significant other into a recovery program, it's a different scenario. I'm not mad at the significant other. I'm upset at the environment that my patient's getting ready to go back into. And so she wanted to go back to Ohio. We had her in Tennessee. She was doing really well. She was getting help now with her underlying trauma. She was getting help with her untreated PTSD. And oh, by the way, she has bipolar disorder. So she's getting treatment for both of those. And I'm really worried about her going back to the Ohio for another really big reason. And that's this. While I had her, she turned 26. What happened when she turned 26? She lost her insurance, but she picked up Ohio Medicaid. So she goes back to Ohio. She doesn't have me there. I don't charge people cash. I take Medicare, I take Medicaid, I treat the uninsured. She's going to go back, and the doctor is going to charge her $125, $150 a week just to write her medication and do nothing with her underlying mental health issues and nothing with her underlying substance use disorder. And I hated that, but I didn't have a choice, and Brooke went back. She sent me this picture after Ava was born. I'm going to take a quick detour. I'm still going to finish on time, I promise. This is the difference between this picture and that picture is 32 weeks. Look at Brooke. Brooke is a dime. Y'all know what a dime is? Yeah. A dime is a damn 10 for the older people in the room, like me. Brooke is a dime, but Brooke started to struggle. She has 2 felonies. And when we talk about social justice and we talk about systems of care, guys, this is why this is important. Brooke has 2 felonies for intent to resell. Brooke's not a drug dealer. Fentanyl has driven these kids' tolerances to things that I've never seen in my life, things that I can't imagine. And the amount that she had to get through every day was enough to trigger an intent to resell when she's not a dope dealer, and they hung 2 felonies on her. She's a certified welder. She should make $50 an hour. She goes back to Ohio. She works in the mini mart and she makes minimum wage, and she has to give most of her money to this Jake leg doctor over here who's doing nothing but writing her a prescription. And Brooke starts to slip and she relapses. Luckily, we have Angie, and we'll leave it right there. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because I want you to see that there's two different systems out there. Y'all recognize this guy? That guy is me. That's when I had a lot of hair. If you wonder why I have a hat on, I'm still self-conscious about it. I'm pretty vain. I haven't got there yet. That's me on graduation from medical school. That's my wife, Karen, and my two best friends from med school. I'd always had a problem with drinking, but I'd never had any issues with drugs. I didn't know that my issues with drinking predisposed me to misuse. I didn't know. I wasn't taught that. I had no clue. And so my med school classmates were the most impressive group of people I'd ever met in my life. And I was intimidated to death on the first day of med school. And then on the second day of med school, they elected me their class president. And I couldn't let them see me drink. I didn't want to embarrass them. I didn't drink or do anything all through med school, but then this day happened, graduation, and they spread to the four corners of the earth. I started drinking just a few weeks later, and then not long after, the story I told you in Johnson City happened, and I was using pain pills. This is my little family back in the day. That's me, my wife Karen, my son Heath, and my daughter Haley. And I can't see it, and I can't come down there, but it looks like a great young picture, right? A young doctor. He's got his little family. I mean, look at the life that I've got in front of me. I'm the first person in my family to ever go to college, let alone med school. I live in a neighborhood that my parents used to drive us through at Christmas time to look at the rich people's Christmas lights. Hell, I got a house in there now. I drive cars I never thought I would drive. And my whole life in front of me. And that picture looks great. We're headed to Knoxville to a football game that day. But if you look in my right pocket, you see a little bulge there. And the bulge is not my keys, and it's not my wallet. The bulge is a bottle of pills. You can pick Brooke out laying in the front seat. Can you pick me out? Guys, there's people out there everywhere walking around. And the thing that I realized when I went into detox, I had 24 people on my floor at Vanderbilt, and I was a doctor. None of them knew I was a doctor. I weighed 175 pounds. I looked terrible. And this is when I started to notice the disparity in the system. This is going to wear me out. All right. There's 24 of us there. The rest of them are damn kids. I promise you they're kids. Out of those 24, how many got to leave that detox and go to treatment? How many? One. You're looking at him. I thought we were all there. I thought we were all going to go through detox and all go to treatment, and those kids went back to the street. I'd hear them at night talking to each other about how to fake being sick so they could get an extra day. The little girl that lives next to me was a prostitute in Printer's Alley in Nashville, right off South Broadway. She was 19 years old. And the day before I left, she came out. Again, no idea who I am, no idea what I do. And she said, "Hey, Steve," she said, "I wanted to show you a picture of what I look like when I'm clean." Her words, not mine. And it was a picture of her junior prom at Mount Juliet High School in Nashville. It was important that I see her like that. Guys, I have not went a week in my life since that without thinking about her. There's two systems of care out there. There's a system of care that I got that pays attention to the things that we're talking about here: social justice, social determinant self, the things that we need for recovery-oriented system care. And this is a system that everybody else gets. I love kids, always have. We go to the beach, 19 of us. We got kids everywhere. All the parents sit under the umbrellas and drink beer. I'm out in the ocean with the kids, and I still do it now, only it's with their kids. This is one of those days, Disney World. I love this picture. That's my son and daughter, my niece and nephew, and my two goddaughters. All of them but two are married, and two of them have their own kids now. And I look at this picture, and it's a wonderful picture, but I know what's going on in the background. It's in October, it's at night, and I'm shiny. I got to Disney World that day and ran out of pills. I'm withdrawing in that picture. I stepped into a system of care that was designed to put me where I am, with all the things that we know are important, and I had access to every one of them. My life did nothing but improve. I became the chief of medicine at my hospital. I ran our residency programs. I became the first drug czar in the history of the state of Tennessee. I'm in a damn TV show, okay? By the way, I didn't get paid anything for that, so I'm not promoting it in that way at all. And I want to tell you about that real quick. You know how many people read Dope Sick? Told you about 500,000? 500,000 bought the book. You know how many people saw the show Dope Sick? 20 million. That's why that stuff is so important. So one day not long ago, I got this by certified mail. Nothing ever good comes from certified mail, ever. I got this. Our governor, Bill Lee, appointed me to the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners. I'm on our medical board. Not only on our medical board, I'm the vice president. Those are my peers beside me. How is that possible, right? I tell you that to tell you this. I should be in front of the Tennessee Medical Board, not on it. Yet I'm on it. Why am I on it? I'm a total on the fence post. That's why. I promise I'm finished. What happened to my friend Brooke? Brooke got put in jail. Somebody without a medical license stopped all of her medication, stopped her Subutex, stopped her mental health medication, no medical license, a jailer. And on the morning of December 13th, 2020, my phone rang early in the morning. It was Angie. Brooke died of an acute overdose of heroin and fentanyl. You could say, okay, this one's over. There's a way out of this crisis. We can kill our way out of it. If enough people die, then we don't have to worry about it anymore. And that would be all fine and dandy, except for who's that other person on that slide? That's Miss Ava. Let's look at Ava's slot machine. What's her first 7? What genetics does she have? Boom, boom, mom and dad. What about number 2, trauma? Her trauma score is 2. She's only 2. Okay, now all she's waiting is the social opportunity. If we don't do something to help this child as she grows up, what are the chances she's in our system within a decade? And everybody in the room knows it's about 100%. This is my most important slide. It was my most important slide. I'm more than my ACEs score. This is me and my family in Florence, Italy. That's my son, Heath, my daughter-in-law, Laura, my wife, Karen, me. We'll spend just a minute on the right side. That's my daughter, Haley. Haley's where all my money goes. When it came time for Heath to leave the house, his ass needed to go, okay? Haley was a different story. I wanted to keep her forever, and then one day she brought that thing on her right home. His name is Sterling. I met Sterling for about 5 minutes on their first date. I told my wife, I think I just met our son-in-law. She told me I'm crazy. 6 years later, I'm standing at the end of a long aisle with my daughter on my right arm in Charleston, South Carolina. I spent a fortune, and I'm a mess crying. And Haley leaned her head on my shoulder right before I walked her down the aisle. And she said, Daddy, you're the first man I ever loved. Thank you for everything you ever did for me. Pretty damn good moment. Kids have never seen my talks. They don't know I talk about this. At that moment, my gratitude was even higher because I was not in the program that night in parentheses. I'm May 11th, 1967 dash, guys. And the reason I am is because I'm a turtle on a fence post. Now, the dads in the room that are looking forward to that moment, when they get in the car and go to a hotel, that still sucks. Just keep that in the back of your mind. And they've been married 7 years now, so when they come to my house, I want them sleeping in different beds, but they never do. My son Heath got married in the pandemic year. He played college baseball. He's got 100 buddies. He came down in April. He's getting married in October. He said, hey, Pops, would you be the best man at my wedding? It's the best man at my son's wedding. I gave my daughter away. And the only reason I was able to do that, guys, is I'm a turtle on a fence post. And it's why I want you to see this. Because the things that you're talking about at this conference matter. They matter in people's lives. And these are the pictures that we want. We don't want damn obituary pictures. We want pictures like this one. And I told you this one used to be my favorite slide until 2 months ago. And now it's my second favorite slide. That's my granddaughter, Cece. On the 15th, she'll be 2 months old, and I get to be a granddad. And I know I may win a couple of minutes over. I also started late. I've been keeping time. This talk is different than the normal ones I do because I wanted you to see the importance of the things that you all work on, because I know we have people in here that are peers, and I know we have people that are training to be peers and are in various stages. This is why it's important. Sometimes we can have people up here that are academic people and they're doing charts and graphs and showing you this and that. Nobody gives a damn about that. This is what we care about. I want you to keep these in your mind, and you can put anybody in you. This is just my story. There's all kinds of stories out there like that, and there's all kinds of stories out there that are yet to be written with the people that you all are going to help in the near future. Thank you all.
Was that okay?
My goodness.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you all.
So what I take away from that is we need more turtles on a fence post. Thank you, guys. Stephen, thank you so much. I knew it was going to be great. I didn't know it was going to be amazing. And can we have one more round of applause for Stephen?